Okay. So I will go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, this workshop is to go over the 2023 More Joy Community Arts Grant Program. The deadline for this application is going to be June 3rd. So here with the Arts Council, our mission is to improve quality of life in New Orleans by supporting, activating, and investing in our city's greatest natural resource, which is our artists, culture producers, and creative community. So the Arts Council does a lot of different programming, a lot of different projects. Our specialty is public art. So we have our mural program. We also have our arts market every month. Twice a month, we have Luna Fest that happens every year in December. We have our youth education and job training program. We have artist trainings. And we also have our grants managing program, which is what I manage. So the grant programs that we manage is this program, the Community Arts Grant, which is funded by the city. And we also manage the state's Louisiana Project Grants Program, which is funded by the state. So these grant programs that we manage, it's not money that's coming from the Arts Council at all. It's all money that's being funded by either the city, the state, and we also have, if we get federal money, we would manage those grants as well. So for the Community Arts Grant Program, excuse that, 2022 is supposed to be 2023. The goal is to provide support for a broad range of arts activities that take place in and have an impact on the residents of Orleans Parish. So as I mentioned earlier, there's normally two categories, which is the New Orleans is Cultural Capital category, but that category is every 2 years. So we just had that cycle last year, meaning that the application wouldn't be open this year for that category, but the More Joy application is every year. So this year is the More Joy cycle. So for the eligibilities, the organization has to be domiciled in Orleans Parish, and it does have to be a nonprofit organization incorporated with the Louisiana Secretary of State. With that said, the organization does not need to have a 501c3 status. If they have it, that's fine, but it's not required. The bare minimum requirement is that they are a nonprofit incorporated with the state. The activity period for this grant is going to be, it'll be starting next year. So it'll be from January 1st to December 31st of 2023. We like to let everybody know just upfront, especially while they're planning their activities in applying for this grant, that the funds most likely won't be available till June. It is a process that this goes through. Once we go through the application process, this is a part of the city's budget, so we usually have to wait for that to be approved, which is until between, I think usually by November or something like that. And so we usually don't send out those official award letters until January of the following year. And so we just like to tell grantees that, just so they keep that in mind, if you are applying for this, that this isn't something where you get money immediately. There is a waiting period until we actually receive money from the city, which is usually between May and June, before we're able to distribute those grant funds out. So here's the timeline. The applications are due June 3rd. So after the applications are submitted, we will have a panel that will review the applications and make funding recommendations. The grant amounts are $3,500. The grant panel, they're probably going to take a few weeks to review the applications. And so after they review the applications and they score them, I have a meeting with them. Everybody discusses the applications. We finalize the scores. After that, they make their preliminary funding recommendations, and that's when I send out the notifications that either you've been recommended, and it's going to say recommended first before you get the official award letter if the panel decides to recommend you for funding. If you do get denied, there is a period where you can do an appeals. Usually, we've never had to do an appeals before, but it's just like if your application doesn't get selected and you just have questions about the comments the panelists left, we'll be more than happy to go ahead and let you know what those comments are. They are going to review it online through our grants management system, which is called Submittable. And so Submittable, which is also where the application is at. So that's where they're going to be reviewing your applications. As I mentioned earlier, in November is when the recommendations are presented to the city council and as part of the city's budget approval for the following year. And so once that gets approved, then we can send out the grant award letters. I'm going to be hosting a compliance session in February to essentially just kind of go over the requirements and just making sure that you are compliant with the grants. And I'm also, the final report is usually available too, probably by April. So I know with some grantees, they may get done with their activities early. So they want to go ahead and submit that final report, but the final report isn't due until the following year. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So what the grant doesn't fund, it doesn't fund Mardi Gras style parades featuring motorized floats and trackers. It doesn't fund parades created for the purpose of promoting a specific product or brand. And it does not fund any parades that are not licensed or permitted by the city. So a lot of the things which I'm about to go into right now. So More Joy, it supports incorporated nonprofit organizations that are producing and celebrating the New Orleans street parading traditions, usually created by New Orleans indigenous cultural groups, for example, Black Mexican Indians, also known as Mardi Gras Indians, and social aid and pleasure clubs. These funds seek to promote the continued success of street parades, examine the cultural traditions behind this local tradition, educate children under the age of 18 in specific traditions, and generally bring in more joy to neighborhoods of New Orleans via the street parade. The funds may be used for project costs, which is including but not limited to artists and musician fees, any materials, permitting fees, marketing and publicity, paying for teachers' fees and stipends, instructors or educators versed in the parading traditions, or money to help build the Black Mexican Indian suits as well. So as I mentioned earlier, the eligibility for this grant is nonprofit organizations. So like I said, the 501c3 is not required. These are just or situations, right? So as long as you check off on one of these boxes, you would be eligible to apply for the grant. So, but the basis is that you are at least incorporated as a nonprofit with the state. So here's the application link here, which I'm gonna go to really quickly just so you see what it looks like. So when you go to our submittable page, these are all, everything that's open right now as far as applications or reports go. So you just want to make sure you're clicking the correct one, which is the 2023 More Joy Application Community Arts Grant. And so you would just click apply. It is required that you create a Submittable account. It's very easy to create. Submittable is a very user-friendly website. I definitely suggest that, once you do create your account, that you have the login saved somewhere, especially if you do end up being recommended and awarded the grant. There are times where organizations may lose their login or somebody else applied for it at the time and now that person's not with them anymore. Anything can happen, but I just highly recommend that whatever your login, email, and password is for Submittable, that you have it saved somewhere so you always have access to this. You're always going to have access to your original application. So any application you submit is submittable. As long as you still have the login information, you will always have access to that original application. All right. So in the application, this is essentially the information it's going to be asking for. So it's going to ask for general information. It's going to ask for your letter of incorporation. I know that maybe some groups may not have that letter anymore. You can always go to the Secretary of State website and search for the entity's name. And, you can, if you don't have the letter there, you can take a screenshot from the Secretary of State website just to show that you are actually incorporated as a nonprofit with the state, and that'll work fine too if you don't have the letter. It's going to ask for information for the project director and the authorizing information, project details, demographics, the target demographics, the service providers that you plan to hire for the project, your project budget, board of directors list, and any kind of sample materials or media samples that you may have. All right, I talked a little bit about this earlier, and it looks like Richard joined in too. So Richard is also another volunteer of ours who is also going to be available to help first-time applicants with this application. Richard, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hi, Ashley. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Reed. I'm the Director of Communications and Public Programs here at the NOCA Foundation, and I am a longtime applicant to the Arts Council for their grant. I handle most of our public grants here, so NEA, Louisiana Division of the Arts, Arts Council, and organizations or divisions like that. That's sort of my area of expertise. So happy to help however I can.
Awesome. So our program, it is designed to provide support for new applicants or applicants who are looking to improve their grant writing for the application. The way that you will opt in is that you would essentially just send me an email, and so I will connect you with either Richard or Dorothy, and you guys will just kind of work out your own schedule and work at your own pace as far as them assisting you. So, that's basically it. If you feel like, you do have questions about it after you kind of look at it, or you don't understand something, or you might need help in writing something, Richard and Dorothy will be more than happy to help you guys. So as far as how funding decisions are made, I mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but we do have a panel process. It's going to be a mix of community members with different kind of expertise and backgrounds, from the artistic community, administrative, backgrounds, things like that. We do have things in place to avoid conflict of interest. So they all sign a recusal sheet. They'll have a list of all the applicants' names on there, and they're going to essentially recuse themselves from any organization that they may have, any ties to or any, conflict with. They just won't review that application. And so they're going to review those applications and make the funding recommendations. Again, everything's going to be done online. And so once I send out that notification after they've made their decisions, then, like I said, you guys can reach out if you have any questions about, if you weren't decided to be recommended for funding, you can reach out for any kind of comments that the panelists may have left on your application. And as I mentioned before, all the grants are $3,500. So say that you do get recommended and you get funded. This is just something to keep in mind during that grant activity period. There is going to be a final report that's going to be due the following year. Their final report is going to ask, basic kind of final report questions and things like that. But what you really want to make sure you just keep saved somewhere, on your computer in a folder, that you're keeping track of the grant expenses. So when that time comes, you're able to easily be able to pull out any kind of check copies you might have, the invoices, receipts. I highly recommend, because one of the things we do ask for is the artist contract, because you will have servicers that you're hiring for the project. So make sure you're saving those contracts that you have with them, or if they're sending you an invoice to go along with the expenses. So everything would have to match on your expense sheet. So you're essentially on the expense sheet, you're just listing everything that you use the grant money for. And for every expense that you list, you want to make sure you have either a check copy or a bank statement that just shows that it was paid out. The invoice or the contract or pay stub is there to show who the money was sent to. So you're showing proof that the money was spent, and then you're showing proof who it was actually paid to, essentially. So it's important to have those two things to go with whatever expenses that you're listing on a spreadsheet. But if it's like, for example, printing material and, or printing costs, it would just be a receipt for something like that, because of course that would have the name of whoever you ordered that through. But particularly if it's people you're paying out, like service providers, you want to make sure you have, if it's just a pay stub, that's fine. But if you're like saying you're paying them through Venmo or Cash App, that's also fine. It's in those screenshots. Just still make sure there's some type of invoice to go with that, or an artist contract to go with that, to say that I did hire this person for this work. And these are just a few of our previous More Joy grantees. We had the VIP Ladies and Kids Social Eating and Pleasure Club, Newcomb Art Museum. They had a project where they hired Black Mexican Indians. I think it was like a year or two ago. We had Black Men of Labor and Crew of Red Beans. And that is all I have for today. Just want to take any questions anybody might have.
Pretty clear to me.
Do Indians that aren't incorporated, is there a fiscal agent that y'all recommend for them to go through to apply for this grant?
Not any that we recommend, but it wouldn't be a case where they can go through a fiscal agent. Like, it would be, say they have a project idea. I think it would kind of be set up to where they would go to that organization and say, hey, we want to do this project. Can you guys apply for this grant and hire us to fulfill this project, if that makes sense?
Okay, so like, say this money is just being used to help them build suits, buy feathers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
They could approach an organization and say, could you apply to this? And
right, everything would have to align though. So if that organization, let's use Antenna for example, if Antenna is putting on a programming where they want to hire Black Mexican Indians, but the Black Mexican Indians need money to buy the materials to make the suit for whatever they're doing, then that's how that would be. But it would be an alignment of whatever project that Antenna is trying to put on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for joining. I'm gonna stop